try to give some tips for our restaurants to survive and to get through this. And so he was nice enough to do this. So he's got some experts. Andrea Marr in a moment is going to tell us about our Eviction Moratorium program in Costa Mesa, which is very important for restaurants and all small businesses to hear. We also, as Eileen said, wanted to bring together the local government and the both in the state, county, and federal level, not so they can as much present in this forum, but to listen to your concerns so that they can come through with legislation and relief. So why don't we go right to Tony?
Exactly.
Tony Penn, and we'll circle back with Andrea to talk about the eviction moratorium. So Tony's an expert in the restaurant industry. He's a consultant, a resident of Costa Mesa, a good friend of mine, and he's put together a wonderful panel of experts. So without further ado, Tony, you're our moderator. Take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? All right, good. So I'm Tony Penn. I've been in the restaurant industry a long time. I've launched a lot of chains from back in the day, opened the first Outback, launched the whole Buca de Beppo thing back in the day. I've been in the industry a long time. As you can see, I'm not as young as John Stevens, but I got to start by saying being around this amount of time, I've never seen anything like this ever happen before. And there's been some crazy things that have happened over the years. So there's really not ever been anything like this. So everything that's being done out there right now, there is no blueprint for it. It's just people trying to figure it out as they go, trying to come up with some ideas, trying to utilize some best practices, trying to look for help from other people that may have the answers. And that is, the situation that's kind of evolved to get us to this point. One of the things we've all learned from all of this is that there's the information changes sometimes daily. So we're going to kind of try to get through as much as we can. We know we don't have an unlimited amount of time, but what we're going to try to do is have some questions answered that come up all the time for us, myself and those on this panel, as well as if there's any questions that aren't answered, you certainly have the right to ask, and we'll get to as many as we can until it gets to a point where we run out of time. The other thing I will say is that we will be you will have access to all our information. If you have any additional questions after the fact, you're more than welcome to sorry about that. Hey, welcome to Zoom. And you're welcome to get a hold of any one of us and ask us any questions. We're all available. We're basically at this point, just trying to help wherever we can and whenever we can. So keep that in mind. The one thing that I will say that I am seeing is that the restaurant industry is a very creative and innovative group. Some of the things that I'm seeing out there are pretty spectacular. Things that I would have never thought of that are happening out in locally and globally to try to survive. Where we're at today is one of survival and trying to figure out how to get through this time with our head above water, so that we're at least prepared, should we choose to enter into the next phase, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go along here. But there's a lot of people on this call, and there's a lot of clients that I have and a lot of people out there that are doing things differently. Some have decided to hunker down and not deal with any of this till it's over. Some have, gone out and tried the different takeout and market route, and are fearful of their employees being exposed and their customers, so they've decided to stop doing that. There are those that are out there on the front lines doing it every single day, and we have one of those here today. So and I'm sure there's a lot on this call that are doing that as well. This isn't a judgment on which way is the right way to do it. There is no consensus. I can tell you, I know restaurateurs that have been successful in a business for years that are doing it one way or the other. They're just trying to figure out what makes sense to them. And that's all that really can happen for anybody that's on this call, is just trying to figure out what's going to work. You know, we all of us probably have heard Governor Newsom talk yesterday or read about it or something, where he's not telling us anything that most of us on this call don't know. I mean, there is a new normal coming. Most of us have kind of evolved into the whole concept that there's going to be a different way of doing business, and we got to be prepared for it if we're going to be able to survive in the new world. And those, I think, that are trying it right now and working on different things have a leg up, you know, because this isn't going away anytime soon. Without proper vaccines and proper testing, it's going to be a slow roll to get it back to where it once was, and it may never get back to where it once was, at least in the anytime near future. So it's going to be about what are we doing to pivot ourselves and to position ourselves to be able to be successful at it. There are a couple examples, and I might share those with you, and that of people that are successful right now making that pivot. But there's a long way to go. The good news is that we can see some light based on the fact that what we're doing here locally in Costa Mesa, as well as around the world, is starting to pay off. But it's going to be a slow roll, and there's going to be a lot of trepidation by both yourselves, your customers, and your employees, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about some financial strategies, some things that we can do to kind of figure out what the cash flow situation is and what that looked like over the next 3, 6, 12 months, so that we can make some decisions on how to utilize cash flow. Excuse me, I have to let people in, so there we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the fear that exists out there with our guests, and we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the messaging to our customers. And we'll see how much time we have. If we still have time, we can talk about employee retention, but we'll just kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. I will say this before we get to the introductions of who's on the panel, is that the one thing that I've seen happen in other crises before, even though it's been nothing like this, is that collaboration is a powerful tool, and utilizing all the people that you have in your network and all the resources that you have to be able to lean on each other and come up with some ideas and not think that you have to make decisions in a bubble. And that's why I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank the city, John Stevens, and because they're the only way we're going to get through this, or the best way we're going to get through this, is by helping out each other. And so I want to thank everybody for allowing this to happen, and thank all of you on this call. So John went through the ground rules. Just stay on mute. I realize we're going to try to use the chat button whenever possible. When we start talking about best practices, if there's something you're doing that's really working, ask the question, and John, let me know, and we'll let you talk about it, because it's kind of hard to explain it in a chat. But once we get to that, so let's go through some introductions of who's on this panel, and then we'll get this party started. We'll start with you, Lindsay. Lindsay Ayers.
Thank you. So my name's Lindsay Ayers. I'm with the law firm of Carruthers, DeSante, and Frudenberger. I'm a partner with them. We are located in Irvine, though we have 5 offices throughout California. We specialize in the defense of employers throughout California and have offices from Sacramento, San Francisco, down to San Diego, with Irvine being our largest. We are really focused, obviously, on all of the new laws that are coming out related to COVID. And as Tony mentioned, they're changing, they're being updated, they're being clarified daily almost. And we're keeping up on them, and not only keeping up on them as attorneys at the firm, but also putting together guidance on our website. And that's something we can circulate if you're interested, or contact me. But if you do go to our website, we have a COVID guidelines page, and that's being updated every day. We have a COVID task force that is focusing on all the guidance that's coming out. So we're on top of it all, and keeping track of it all. I am a Costa Mesa resident, if I didn't mention that. And yeah, I'll be here to answer some of the most asked questions that I've been getting, and hopefully providing some clarification, guidance on a couple different topics here today.
Great.
Thanks, Tony.
Lindsay. And just so you know, Lindsay, she gets bombarded every single day with questions. Every time I try to reach out to her, that's what she's dealing with. So hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of the questions that you have. If not, then you'll have that opportunity. From the insurance side, let's go over to Chris Trombley.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Trombley. I'm the Director of Food and Beverage at an insurance agency in Gutman and Bogart. So all of my clients are either restaurants or food producers or suppliers in one or another. And I also lead our COVID-19 task force in terms of client communications. We have a lot of good information on our website from an insurance and risk management perspective about controlling these areas, and a lot of it is directly useful to the restaurant industry, but business in general. And I'm leading an initiative with a partner of my firm to help workers' comp costs in California, and I'll get more into that a little later.
Cool, thank you, Chris. We also have from the culinary side, a chef who's been a chef all around the world, but he's luckily with us here locally, has his own consultancy business, Chef Matthew Tobin. Oh, there you are. What's up, man?
You guys hear me?
I got you.
Awesome. I was struggling with the mute on the last call. So yeah, my name is Matt Tobin. I'm a culinary consultant, born and raised actually in Orange County, California. Ran many restaurants in the Costa Mesa area. Little bit of a background, not only in hospitality, but as well as retail and food manufacturing. So when Tony gave me the opportunity to be able to help out any of my my peers in this industry, I really leaped at the opportunity, and just looking forward to helping out as many people as I can today with any type of question at all.
Great, thanks, Matt.
My pleasure.
And finally, we have Shachi Mira, the owner of Adya Restaurant, as long as I'm saying all of that correctly. And she's kind of representing independent local restaurant owner, because I wanted to have a voice.
Thank you.
Shachi.
Hi, I'm Shachi. As Tony said, I'm the owner and chef at Adya Restaurant. We have 2 locations. The one in Anaheim is inside the food hall, the Anaheim Packing House. So that one's obviously closed. And we have a location in Irvine that's currently open. And I'm working at a pop-up in Orange currently. That's at OC Baking Company. So basically, I'm just like all other small restaurant owners, just trying to fill out loan paperwork and see if we can get these loans, and figuring out how to proceed effectively, keep our businesses alive, and what we need to change to move forward.
Great. Thank you, Shachi, for being on. I did want to say we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the CARES Act specifically. That's kind of been out there. It hasn't changed as of today. The SBA.gov and CalRest, the California Restaurant Association, has a great explanation of it. But what I will say is that is a small piece to what needs to happen in the restaurant and retail industry. I work with a group called the Independent Restaurant Coalition, saverestaurants.com. And they have a liaison to Congress that works specifically on making sure the restaurants and the retail gets taken care of in this process. As everybody may or may not be aware, the PPP doesn't really work that well for restaurants because the June 30th deadline doesn't make any sense, because we're not going to be in a position to have 100% of our employees back 8 weeks prior, the way this rollout is kind of turning out. So they're working. There's a woman that's representing the IRC that has accomplished a lot that you might not even know about behind the scenes. She's worked with Congress throughout different administrations, most recently with Obama. So she has a voice on Capitol Hill, and that's extremely important, because there's a lot of things happening right now with regard to making sure that there's some additional monies that goes to the restaurant industry, that the date gets pushed back significantly. They've already offered grants to the airline industry, and we're asking for at least what they got, because we have 3 to 4 times more employees in the small independent restaurant industry. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. I just want you to know that. But to that point, I will say, and I think, John, you already echoed it, or I'll echo it for what you said, is fill out the applications. It doesn't matter where it goes, what happens, just fill it out, because there's a lot of new things that are going to be happening here over the next couple of weeks, and you don't want to be behind the 8 ball when that all happens. So if you do have something that's really gnawing at you that you really want to talk about regarding CARES, feel free to ask that when we get to questions. But because nothing has changed dramatically since it's started in the end of March, then we weren't going to spend a lot of time on it. But I did want to start with you, Lindsay, if that's okay.
Hey, Tony,
Yeah.
can we see if Andrea, are you with us? Oh no, my goodness.
Hold on.
No.
Oh,
There's-
there, she's in. So this is,
Can you hear me?
yeah, now we can hear Andrea. Andrea, why don't you tell, before we jump into the panel, why don't you tell everybody about yourself and also about the Eviction Moratorium program that we've enacted in Costa Mesa?
Yeah, sorry about that earlier, guys. I don't know what happened. Considering I'm on Zoom meetings like all day long, you think I'd be a pro at this right now. So anyway, yeah, so I represent District 3 here in Costa Mesa. We were joking earlier about expertise, and I just said my expertise in this area is like eating a lot and visiting a lot of Costa Mesa restaurants on a regular basis. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Just to quickly speak to the rent issue. So, gosh, almost a month ago now, Costa Mesa took pretty dramatic action when all of this was happening, and put into effect an eviction moratorium for both commercial and residential properties. And so what that means in application is that rent is still due, but it's not due until 120 days and after the end of the state emergency. So really it's a rent deferral program, because that's what we're legally allowed to do. That's sort of the extent of what we are able to do as a city council, that applies for commercial and residential tenants here in the city. And so that the rent is still ultimately due in full, but if you have any reason related to COVID, loss of income being the predominant one, you were able to defer out being able to pay that rent. And we've got some great resources on the city website, including a form, with the idea being that we're still encouraging folks to talk to their landlord, to engage in that process, so we have some helpful tools in order to facilitate that process. So that's what's going on in the city. And I don't want to delay. I was supposed to introduce Tony too, so I'm sorry. You've already covered that piece.
Okay.
So I'll turn it back.
I'm the least
to
important.
Tony I'll turn it back to Tony to talk to the panel, but I'm available for any questions about the rent piece.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. And you're not the only one that has a problem with Zoom, even though they're on 40 calls a day. So
I mean, yeah.
It happens all the time. So we'll start with Lindsay. the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, also known as FFCRA, that one that's one of those ones that keeps changing. What's going on? What's the newest? What's the latest?
It is. So I wanted to be able to update everybody on kind of what's happening next with the FFCRA, and then answer some of the questions I've been getting most recently and some of the clarification that the DOL has recently provided. So the provision went into effect at the beginning of April. They've been talking about it for longer than that. So for about the last 30 days, we've been getting guidance from the DOL, and they've continued to roll out that guidance. And as everybody's had questions about what they've rolled out, they've provided more answers. So and thus far, certainly everybody's been doing their best to comply. But what's changing is that as of Monday, so Friday is kind of the end of this 30-day grace period, the DOL can start bringing enforcement actions. So just before I start talking about it, FFCRA covers both the paid sick leave of 2 weeks or 10 days, and it also addresses this expanded FMLA. Now, as restaurant workers, they're deemed essential, and the shelter at home order puts that into effect. But that alone does not allow that leave to be taken for these essential workers in restaurants. Now, the questions that I've been getting, for example, is what if one of my essential workers is 65 or older and is at risk for contracting COVID? What if they have a health condition or a pre-existing condition that makes them more at risk? Is this leave for them? And despite the guidance that's been coming out, it's not crystal clear as to what that answer is, but what we've been advising is that you should allow leave for those categoried individuals. Another question we've been getting is, what if an employee has symptoms of COVID? They either come into the workplace and they say they have a fever, but they want to work through it. Certainly you're going to be sending them home. Or they may be calling saying, I'm experiencing symptoms of COVID. I think I have it. And then they say they want to take that leave in one of those two scenarios. You do not need to grant the leave at that time. And what the DOL is saying is that you can require them to get a note. So there's a few different circumstances. As long as they are seeking a medical diagnosis, so they're in the process of getting that note, and they can show forth, right? They have a doctor's appointment, they have communication, or if a doctor has either diagnosed them with COVID, or a doctor has simply said, I've done an assessment and they need to stay home, then that leave would be required if sought. Another question I've been getting is, what if the employee needs to care for a family member with COVID? Now, yes, employees can use leave for that purpose if requested, but the question I've been getting is, can they be required to use sick leave, for example? And the answer to that latter question is no. That's some of the guidance that's recently come out that we've interpreted, and it just so happened was a lot of the questions that we had been getting, so that guidance was helpful. But that's the most recent information out on the FFCRA.
Well, and again, it's something that if you need further understanding or suggestions or any type of input or feedback, then feel free to reach out to Lindsay and the website. And I think they continually post on their COVID response website which will allow you to get information up to date.
Correct. And I think one of the things I failed to mention is that I do a lot of work with the food industries, with hospitality, and with restaurants. So that's why I was interested and honored to be asked to speak today, because this is my world and my neighborhood.
I did want to, while I had you on here, I did want to ask you about furloughing, because that's a question I keep getting everywhere I go is, how long can I furlough for? Do I have to pay out the PTO when I furlough? How do I notice? What kind of notice do I give? Can you just kind of go over that briefly?
Sure. Sure. So one of the questions has been, how long can we furlough? And there, again, unfortunately, it's not a crystal clear answer. There is there's some information out there that makes people believe that the EDD is only allowing for 2 weeks or a 10-day furlough. It's not clear, but a lot of restaurants have been furloughing and are furloughing for more than that 2 weeks. And as far as what we've been advising is that that's fine. It's not the most conservative approach, but that it does comply. And what we've been doing to supplement that is giving guidance on what that furlough notice then looks like to protect the restaurant. So the follow-up question then is, well, then do we need to pay out the PTO? Again, it's unclear. The most conservative would be yes to do it. If you can, great, go ahead and do it. But a lot of restaurants are not necessarily paying out that PTO, but instead what they're doing is making it available to the employees to take if needed, and not requiring them to use it. Gotcha. Another question, I don't know if how familiar you might be, but there is a notice of reduced earnings, a 2063 form. And so we're getting questions related to that as people are looking more into it. It's an EDD form, and it's basically something you would generally file when you are furloughing. But the EDD has come out and said, in light of coronavirus and the burden on everybody, and truly, I'm sure it's the burden on them, you would have to submit these forms weekly. And they have relieved companies and restaurants of the requirement to submit those forms. So that is good news. It's a weight off, because that's a lot of work when you have a number of employees. Now, in terms of, I'd mentioned the notice of furloughing, there are a number of things that I like to put in the notice. I usually like to start out with a very human element, relay to the employees that we're concerned about their health, about their safety. It probably goes without saying, but it's important to say. And I think it gives them a comfort level that you're doing this because you either have to, well, it generally is because you have to. And whether it's for their health and safety, whether it's for financial reasons, that you do care, that you are looking for it to be temporary, we advise that you put an end date on it, and that helps it from becoming that termination, that layoff, and keeps it within the furlough realm. Even if that date needs to change, and you can put in the notice that it may need to change, you are putting an end date and you're expecting it to be this certain date. I think that's important. I explained what a furlough is. I know this word has been used by everybody now, but the question I get asked most is, what's the difference between a furlough and a layoff? What's a temporary furlough? What's a temporary layoff? What does that all mean? And so the employees don't necessarily understand, even if you do, to educate them, to explain what that is when you are putting them on a furlough, I think is important. I like to indicate in the notice that their employment is at will. The same reason you put it in an employee handbook, You just want to relay that by advising them that there is this furlough, that there's no guarantee of employment. There's no guarantee that you are going to bring them back. And it's just something to protect the restaurant, the employer. Let's see.
I had a quick question that just
Yeah.
came by Mayor Foley. Is there a certain number of employees that these rules apply to?
Furloughs, no. Now there is something called the WARN Act. And once you're looking at 50 employees laying off, and that's layoff or furlough, 50 employees at one location, then you're looking at a required, and I should have clarified that, there is a WARN notice when you are looking at a large number of employees, and those would be different requirements. This type of a furlough notice would be smaller furloughing. WARN Act would be a whole different conversation.
So furlough is you're planning on bringing them back, and a layoff it's still up in the air, kind of. Yes.
When you lay them off, that is a break in the employment. So that is a termination, and it's more final. You are paying out the PTO. Benefits stop. When you're furloughing, the benefits continue. And then that's why that question of the PTO comes up. But you make that PTO available to them. But if you do have 50 in one location that you are needing to furlough, there are a whole other set of rules required under the WARN Act. And
Okay.
That's another conversation.
Right. It's another conversation, but if you have that many employees and you want to have that conversation, then
We're happy to
interrupt
help.
at some point. Okay, thank you, Lindsay. That was helpful. And again, you can, if you have a question for Lindsay, go ahead and write it down, and we'll get to it, at the end. That cash flow is obviously an issue with pretty much everybody on this call. And so what is the process of determining and what the cash flow situation is going to be? I would tell you that the clients that I'm working with now, we've got a full-on 3, 6, and 12-month projection, so that we know exactly how much cash, well, not exactly, but we have a pretty good understanding of how much cash we have on hand, so that we can make better decisions about what to do with that cash. And there's going to be some conversation about that. I did want to kind of share with you what that looks like. If an offer, I'm sure everybody might have their own way of doing these projections. If you don't, there's some good tools out there. Michael Harris, who's with Aperture Merchant Solutions, he's on here. He shared one that he's using that was actually created by another guy that's on the call, Michael Viola with Pure Accounting Systems, and they do restaurant accounting. And I wanted to show it to you. And Michael, Michael Harris, you can start by giving me, how you got to this point. And then I want to get Michael Viola to talk a little bit about it, because he can offer, I think, more understanding, and he can also offer an opportunity to learn more on how to use it. So
absolutely. Yeah. So Viola will be the
share it first.
Yeah. Okay.
But go ahead. You can start talking about it.
In terms of how we got to this point, how do you mean by that? What do you want me to talk about there?
Okay, there it is. I just wanted to put it up there so we know what it looks like.
Oh, there we go. Cool. Yeah, this is a hell of a tool that Michael Viola created, and like you said, it basically puts together a solid cash flow projection for basically through the end of the year. But you can adjust it and copy and paste your periods and the columns all the way out. Michael was very thoughtful in terms of all of the different categories, inflows and outflows that you see there. You can also add and subtract items as you wish. But what this does basically is allows you to kind of get a feel for what you're going to look like. And this is not comfortable for anybody to do. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's a little bit daunting. It's a little bit scary. But once you kind of dig into it and start layering in your actuals, which all the instructions are provided in there in terms of where you get your data, basically it's just downloading it from your bank and dropping it into the model. But we start with your actuals and then start projecting out on a weekly basis. I think we have that on here. So, and then from there, the important part is then you can take a look and see, okay, look, at this point, we're going to be in trouble without a cash infusion of some sort. And at that point, what do you do? Do you have bank financing that you can lean on? Do you have alternative financing you can lean on? Do you have, can you lean on your merchant card processor for a merchant cash advance? And then finally, friends, family, and fools is what I always refer to, the 3 Fs. Can you get a cash infusion from a private source, that sort of thing. But what this does is allows you to also look at what can you also put off in terms of your cash flow. What can you kind of, have that, like Tony mentioned yesterday, where can you have that, where can you start having these conversations with your vendors and say, look, maybe your automobile and travel, your I don't know, your mechanic or something like that, for example. Say, look, I can't pay you for, over the, all in a lump sum, but maybe we can, work out a payment plan, or I'll pay you by X date. Just an example. This could apply to any vendor that you've got out there, but it gives you that, this tool gives you that ability to kind of eyeball where you're going to kind of be in trouble and what you might be able to do about it. Now, for some people, obviously that date might come up a lot faster than others who are not so well capitalized. But even regardless, it's still important for you to take a peek at that. And everybody, I think, it needs to, whatever business you're in, should be doing this on a normal basis. This should be, cash is absolutely crucial for any business, and every business should be taking a peek at what their kind of, 6 to 12 month period kind of looks like in terms of cash. I was a banker, commercial and investment banker for 21 years prior to starting Aperture Payment Solutions. And one thing we always said was that all projections are wrong, but you do need them. You got to look in the future and see what's going on. So but that's kind of, kind of the basic overview of the model. I'd open it up to Michael to kind of, if he wants to chime in. It's his baby. And, kind of maybe wants to discuss any kind of particulars about it. But
thanks, Mike. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, go ahead.
The model is basically, a lot's changed since I've written it in terms of the world we live in, but it was written towards the end of March. And what I did basically was at that point, there was no PPP or even it was very infantile in terms of where it's going. And so we set the forecast up on a weekly basis. And I really try to simplify this model. One of the reasons, why I founded my company is that nobody gets in the restaurant business to do debits and credits. And so what I wanted to do was have a very simplistic model that restaurant owners or, their managers can use to help forecast cash on a weekly basis. And so the topics or the buckets that you see in column A are very indicative of restaurants. It's not indicative of a lot of other industries, although it can be modified as such. But it really helps owners to really figure out, okay, where are they gonna, where are they gonna run out of money? When are they gonna have money? And it really helps them just sleep better at night. And that was really the goal. I think spending, a few minutes on this model doesn't do it justice in terms of the moving parts. Although it's very simplistic, there's a few things to understand. And, I went through this with another gentleman earlier today, and, having a second model that's completely wiped clean might help out, because there's a lot here. And so a lot of this data is fake data, but it really helps illustrate the model. And so, Mike Harris did a fantastic job of really describing the model. And it's good validation that a banker likes it, but it's good. I mean, you have to have,
Former recovering banker.
you have to have a good sense of where you are and where you're going, and figure out when you're going to get into trouble and when things are going to be grim or better. I'm sorry. And so you just have to take it week by week. And that's what this model is intended to do. And so I'm hosting a webinar next week on Tuesday, April 21st at 1 p.m. to talk about how things are going to go in this model and how it'll work. And so I'm sure Tony will, or somebody on this call, hopefully will have the email addresses, and I invite everybody. This model is what I would call freeware is, I guess, is the term. And so you can take this and use it yourself. Alternatively, we can manage it for you too. So there are really two ways about it. And I can get more into detail next week on the call.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So real quick, we're kind of at a point where you've done your cash flow projections. You kind of have a pretty good understanding of how much cash flow you have. Now comes the tough decisions. And Michael Harris alluded to it, that you have to, decide where's the money going to go. There's only so much of it there, if any. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should do, but I will give you some guidance in that if you didn't have a solid communicative relationship with your vendors, now's the time to do it. If you, whenever possible, specifically when you talk about landlord and rent, there's just a lot of creative things going on out there, and there's a lot of landlords that I've been talking to that are specifically allowing their tenants to, have some sort of abatement for at least a temporary period of time. And it was, this particular landlord just waived April he's got like 100 different locations. So he waived April for everybody, and he's thinking about May. Now, obviously he has obligations as well with his bank. So he has to go to the banks that have mortgaged those particular properties and try to work with them. And some are working with them and some aren't. But the bottom line is you need to have the conversations now, and you need to establish that relationship. And one way to do that is to be able to have a tool like this, that you can go to your landlord or any other of your vendors and say, here's what I've worked out. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's when I think PPP might land. But here's what my cash flow looks like. So what can we do up to this point? And I would strongly recommend trying to speak to these people, not about deferments, because like I said, this is going to be a very slow roll. So in 3 months, you're not going to have the cash to drop a lump sum payment of 3 months worth of rent. It's going to have to be extended. I know a lot of landlords that are extending it to the end of the lease, so that everybody wants the survival to happen. Nobody wants to see anybody close. It's not like landlords have a backlog, at this point of people waiting to take that property. They want to see you succeed because this obviously helps them. But I would take the next step, which is establish an emotional relationship with your vendors. Show them what you've done to try to be able to forecast what you have, and then have some conversations, some hard conversations, and see what comes of it. To John's and Andrea's point, they're not kicking you out tomorrow. So, you have some time to work on this stuff, but don't sit and wait for that to happen. You need to take control of that situation.
Can I just jump in and just say regarding cash flow, there's a couple of things that the city is looking into. Now they haven't been brought up to the city council, but they're exploring it. And that is a micro financing program. There are a number of micro financing programs that are available. One is called Kiva, K-I-V-A. You can look into that. And the other thing is something that Mayor Foley has raised, which is to any type of fees that are required for like permitting. Let me give you an example. When you guys go back, as Tony said, and you start to operate, there may be a different model that you need to use because you need to provide more social distancing in your restaurants. So we're looking into waiving or substantially limiting the permitting fees for that, just so that the restaurants can do the necessary TIs to get back in business. So if you see anything or think of anything that we could do as a city, from a city standpoint, let us know. And I can tell you that Dan Inlows, who's on the call, and his department is working really hard and creatively on all those things, including also a buy local campaign that we're working on as well. So, but if you have any thoughts, let me or Andrea or the city staff know. Of course, and Mayor Foley too.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that's one of the other things that's happening a lot out there is GoFundMe. So there are a lot of restaurants that are kind of reaching out to the community and asking for help. There's a lot of different ideas floating around. I know a lot of restaurants that are, creating product that they have on hand, giving it away and asking for donations for employees. There's a lot of different and good ideas out there. And someone asked the question if there was any incentives or reinforcement for developers to provide rent relief. I don't know of anything legally or having to do anything with an ordinance. I do know that the incentive is to be able to maintain their tenants. And I know a lot of, and I've spoken to them. I've spoken, like I said, to somebody that has 100 restaurants, and he wants all of his to stay. He doesn't have anybody that he wants to get rid of. So he's doing whatever he can. And he's speaking to everybody about, what he can do to help. So there are a lot of landlords like that out there. There's a few that aren't. And then that's going to be a tougher decision, but you got to at least start the dialogue.
Well, and Tony, that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons we made sure that we had people that are on the call from the state and federal government, because there could be in relief packages, tax credits, things of that nature that can apply if you do give rent relief. And the other thing that I think is going to be explored by our state legislation, our legislature, is codifying some of these doctrines that are common law doctrines, such as commercial frustration and force majeure, and figuring out how those are going to apply to the obligations of restaurants to pay rent when the government has effectively shut you down, or 90% of your business down. And that would apply to restaurants and also other non-essential businesses. I'm an attorney. I've been a trial attorney for 31 years. And I know that if there's not some codification of those legal doctrines that apply, we're going to see nothing but litigation on those issues, which are affirmative defenses. We're going to see nothing but litigation for the next 3 to 5 years, interpreting them on a case-by-case basis. So if you haven't got the drift, the folks from the state who are on the call, if you could follow up on that, that would be really good. And I really appreciate that you guys are on the call to listen to that.
Great. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And be mindful of things like taxes and insurance. And here's one other thing I would tell you. If you're in a position where you're renegotiating a lease or you're sending out an LOI for a new property, I would hold off until this thing starts to ramp up, because there could be some changes that would be significant in that negotiation. So that came from somebody I'm working with currently who has an LOI in place, and we've decided to hold off on that until we get through this, because who knows what expenses are going to be. So speaking of insurance, I want to bring on Chris Trombley. because I get a lot of questions about insurance and business interruption. And so just from the insurance perspective, Chris, what's being done to help businesses through this crisis?
Thanks, Tony. I'm a property and casualty insurance broker, so I can really only speak to the workers' comp, liability, property side of this and not the group benefit side. But from my chair, we do not want to take this sitting down. We see businesses suffering badly. We see businesses struggling to find coverage under property forms to pay for business interruption. So California has done a number of things to at least alleviate some of the burden, and we're pushing for more. So one thing that we found that was making my whatever hair I have left turn to fire was that the workers' comp premiums were going to stay highly elevated throughout this crisis, even if you have employees who are getting paid on your payroll, but not actually working. They're home, they're furloughed, whatever it may be. You still have to pay workers' comp premiums for those employees, even though they have no possibility of getting injured at work. So I partnered with somebody in my insurance agency, and we wrote a letter to the state bureau that manages the regulation of workers' comp and how premium gets affected. And we said, kindly enough, that we find it outrageous that employers have to continue paying workers' comp for employees that aren't even on the work site or have no exposure to get injured. And got a letter back within a couple of days from one of their executives that took it very seriously and said that they're writing emergency legislation that will be in front of the insurance commissioner shortly to remove the necessity for payroll when you have people working from home or not working at all, just remaining on payroll. And then in addition, they're going to remove any workers' comp claims that come out of a COVID-19 infection from experience modifications, which will ultimately lower workers' comp premiums or at least keep them in line if a claim gets filed in that capacity. And then lastly, the California Insurance Commissioner issued a bulletin on Monday saying that he is demanding that all insurance companies writing policies in the state of California review their exposures and refund any what they call excess premium back to policyholders, at least for March and April. So every insurance company is now charged with looking at their types of insurance that they have and figuring out can they return some premium while still maintaining adequate reserves to pay claims. Some auto insurers for personal insurance have already done this, like Geico and Liberty Mutual and a handful of others. They've given 15% returns back. So we're looking for similar types of things on the commercial side as well.
Thanks. I was just reading a question, and we were going to get to this anyways, but that's good news on the workers' comp, especially if we get some refunds and if they can lower the rates based on some pretty obvious situation. Well, the question that just came up, and the question I'm getting all the time, is about business interruption claims, and there's a lot of discrepancy as to, just because I'm open and maybe I'm doing 50, 60, or 70%, do I not get to file a claim? So what's the latest on business interruption? Because that's the one everybody keeps asking me about.
That's our number one question over the last few weeks. And my first client to report an issue is a large restaurant group that they have a location in their headquarters in Costa Mesa. And we immediately filed a business interruption loss with their insurance company. We recognize that it's going to be very challenging to get these paid because many, if not most, property policies that provide coverage for business interruption have a virus exclusion. The insurance companies intentionally deny anything related to a virus because they can't charge an adequate premium to pay the billions of dollars of losses that this would take. Not to defend the insurance companies, but they just do not have $400 billion a month available just to pay the small businesses for their business interruption losses. So they never intended to provide coverage and specifically excluded it. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't file a claim, because not every policy has a virus exclusion. There are challenges happening both through civil litigation as well as legislation that could overturn some of these. But I really caution everybody on this call and everybody that might listen to this that all of that litigation, all the legislation, and the resulting litigation from legislation will take a long time. We need a federal government fund to start paying for loss of business, because everything from an insurance side is going to take way too much time, and too many businesses will fail before that actually gets resolved.
And you know, I'm hearing the same thing, and I'm hearing it from the woman that's representing us on Capitol Hill, that they're working to get funds that can go into the insurance pool so that the insurance companies don't have to assume the burden of paying for those business interruption claims. But to your point, and just like the PPP and everything else, get the claim in, because you don't know where it's going to be, and if you wait until something does happen, then you may, you know, end up backlogged or, you know, behind the 8 ball, as they say.
One more thing to add is we've heard that some brokers are telling their customers to not file a claim because there's no coverage, and that's just nonsense. The claim should be filed. You should preserve the rights under your policy in case something were to change, or perhaps you don't have a virus exclusion and there is some wiggle room. So if somebody tells you not to file a claim, demand it. It's your policy. Make sure that you preserve your rights under that, no matter what a broker says.
Okay, that's good. So the last question I had for you, Chris, that keeps coming up is, how can restaurants, and not just restaurants, but how can you lower your cost of insurance to help with the immediate cash flow situation?
So this is something we're spending a ton of time on right now, is reaching out to all of our clients and saying, how can we reduce exposures that aren't there anymore to lower your cost of insurance? So let me give you some examples. Payroll might be down significantly, and if you're not reporting your workers' comp payrolls on a monthly basis, you should make an adjustment to your payrolls now so that your future installments are significantly reduced. Your sales may be significantly down, likely are significantly down, and your general liability premiums, as well as some other areas of insurance, are based on your sales estimate. Reduce those now so that you don't have to wait until your policy gets audited to get a return. You want to lower your monthly installments to help cash flow. It's very important. If you have delivery vehicles and you're not using all of them, you can place them on non-op status with the DMV and take them off your insurance. If your inventory levels aren't so high, you can reduce your property insurance to consider that. The insurance companies have offered, almost all of them have offered, deferring payments for 60 days or 90 days. So you can put your insurance payments on deferral too, to just, you know, assist with cash flows, but it's somewhat helpful, and it's somewhat, well, ho-hum, we still have to pay for this eventually. So there are ways to make it work, and it takes a bit of creativity from the insurance broker side to figure that out, but that's what we're here for. That's what we get paid money for, and we better damn well do a good job to alleviate any burden that we can.
And again, that's the lesson in everything we're talking about with regard to dealing with vendors, is have that conversation. If Chris was your insurance broker, or insurance partner, then, you know, you would sit down with him and he would give you a laundry list of things you can do right now. So get with your vendors and work some deals out. Okay, The next thing I wanted to talk about was just some best practices of what's happening out there. We're seeing all different things happen. A lot of creativity with regard to takeout and curbside and drive-through, and as Shachi's going to talk about pop-ups. But there's a lot going on, and you know, my recommendation, we're going to talk about a couple here, but the recommendation is to reach out and see what people are doing. If you want to stay open, or if you want to talk about what's going to happen as we start to ramp up and the reconfiguring of your dining rooms, etc. There's just a lot of smart people on this call, and a lot of smart people that are out there in our industry that can help. So you don't have to figure it all out yourself. And then we'll talk a little bit about that as when we end this, when we end the call. But Shachi, why don't you talk about what you're doing over there at your restaurants?
Sure. So we had to obviously close our first location, which is in the Anaheim Packing House, because it's a food hall and people aren't allowed to gather. What we knew about that location, even though eventually, like a week or 2 weeks later, we were asked if we wanted to start doing takeout from that location, we knew that because of the location, the takeout orders that we were getting, even in a normal time, were mostly people that were visiting. So Disneyland, Convention Center, things like that. And all those people are gone. There's no one there. There's no Disneyland, there's no Convention Center, there's no tourists. So that location we have closed, and it's still closed. It's been almost a month. The Irvine location was already set up to go and for takeout. So that one we've continued. One thing that we've started doing, I noticed friends of mine at OC Baking Company, Dean Kim, had started a pop-up almost about a month ago. And he has opened up his wholesale bakery to his colleagues and friends and opened up a pop-up. So for him, he had to lay off about 90% of his staff because he was a wholesale baker selling to restaurants, and most of his clients are closed or closing or reduced so significantly that affects his business immediately. So he's selling bread that helps him keep the team that he has employed. And the rest of us are doing, Crema's doing pastries, Sessions is doing sandwiches and salads. We're doing prepackaged curries. And we're going to start doing naan tomorrow. We're doing prepackaged spice mixes. I'm giving that with a recipe for people to go home and cook it. And what I've found being at this market with a bunch of other vendors, because we're adding vendors, we have dumplings coming in twice a week. We have paella and empanadas. We have mini donuts, and we're going to have one more next Friday. So we're only open Monday to Friday, and what I'm finding is people want something that they can eat right now, but for the most part, people are almost used to cooking at home now, and they want to make something different today. So a lot of people that are picking up Indian food for me are like, oh, this is going to add some fun to our weekly menu planning. And we have this week planned, so we'll come back next week and get this from you. But what I found is people want something they can take home and do themselves. And we're going to take that sort of business learning that we're doing at the market every day and apply that to when we reopen Anaheim, and to once Irvine sort of gets into, when we get to a place where we're not just takeout and delivery. Because people want to be able to come in and get something cold and take it home and put it in their fridge and maybe eat it today, or maybe eat it tomorrow. Maybe put it in the freezer and eat it next week, because it's all planned that way. But people are wanting to buy stuff that is take homeable in a way. So we're prepping for that. I know people, my friends that have full service restaurants, where you need to start thinking about how you're going to get tables out and where are you going to put them. If you can't have as many tables in your restaurant, where are you going to store them in the meantime? And are we all going to, turn to single serve single-use utensils and plates and single-use menus and cups. There's a lot that we have to think about as restaurants as we move forward, because we're not going back to where we were. There's going to be a new way we all do business, and there's a new way that people are eating, and we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and there was just a couple points that I wanted to make. One is the importance of how the message is communicated to the customer right now. One of the things that Shachi does is she's out there herself, standing in front of her customers, and basically selling her product and speaking to them directly. And one of the things I've noticed, and I've been working with a few different clients on this, is trying to get them, even if it's the general manager level, if you have multi-units, to make sure that that's the person that's talking to your customers, and to utilize all the resources that you have, whether it's social media. We've talked about using Nextdoor app to be able to go in and have a conversation with your community so that you know what it is that they're looking for. Because we're obviously in a situation where we're not doing business as usual. I have one client he's, sells a lot of Asian fusion, but he made up some cool pizzas because people were asking for pizza. But he went out and he went on Nextdoor and he went on social media and he asked his customers, what is it that you would like me to do? And again, I'm not suggesting that that's the only conversation you should have with them, but I am suggesting that you have a conversation with your clientele, because that relationship is going to pay huge dividends once we get sort of back on track, and people are going to have a connection that they didn't have before. Go ahead, Shachi.
That personal connection is something that is also not only going to help you later, it's sort of helping Carrie right now, right? So for your friend who's making pizza because that's what people asked him to do, it's being available, creating a bond of trust. People know everyone's suffering together, right? It's just everyone's suffering is different in some form. But if I'm there and I'm able to talk to you about what I'm doing, and you're able to talk to me about how what I'm doing helps you, or if I did this, it would help you more, or whatever the case may be. And that's true for all of our vendors there at the pop-up. All the owners are there, and we're the ones talking to the people and kind of figuring it out as we go. It's also, to be honest, really nice to be in a space full of peers that are in the same boat, and we can talk about it and we can sort of brainstorm solutions for all of the current issues that we're all facing together.
Yep. And that's a great point. And again, even if you're not open at this time, it's just still a good time to stay in communication with your customers. And to Shachi's point, I would definitely recommend reaching out to your fellow restaurateurs or retailers and coming up with some ideas and working on it, because we're all in this together, and unless somebody's like right next door to you, they're not going to be your competition. So you should utilize all the resources that you have to help that are at your disposal. So, and Shachi does
Tony.
Yeah,
Tony. So I learned today about an organization called dine11.org, and last week I learned of another nonprofit called frontlinefoods.org, and the model is to get donations and then give the money to the restaurants so that they can create meals for healthcare workers. And then Dine11, the founder just said that they were going to pivot to, as there are fewer COVID cases, to low-income families or seniors. Have you seen any of your clients use those or sign up to be partners for those types of organizations, or has anybody on the call done that? Maybe just talk about it in chat or whatever.
So one of the things that our pop-up is doing, Dean from OC Baking, Dee from Break of Dawn, and Tarit, one of the big things that they started this market by doing is Dee made soup, and Dean gives a loaf of bread, and Tariq makes a cookie for all of frontline workers. And whether you come into the pop-up market to pick it up, or we've been getting a lot of volunteer deliverers come and pick it up. We haven't signed up with any of the services that you mentioned, but that's a huge thing that's happening. And people are just coming in with donations and just handing them off, sort of, you know, in appreciation for what we're doing.
That's great. And I have clients that it may not be those two specific ones that you're referring to, but they are doing a lot of deliveries to hospital workers, pizzas, etc. Work with Pizza Hut, and they're doing a lot with them as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to create some goodwill and out there, with, especially with product that you know, maybe it's time to do something with it. So, the other big thing that's coming up now, and John, I might, you know, something that we might want to talk about with the city, specifically the health departments, is, you know, the pop-up market, the grocerants, you know, you selling groceries out of your restaurant is becoming commonplace with a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses figured it out that, you know, hey, my Cisco dealer's got a ton of toilet paper in stock, and yet you can't go to a grocery store to find any. So they started, you know, creating these markets where they were selling eggs, milk, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, sanitary supplies, etc. So those are in play. I had one case up in LA where the health department kind of came down on them, but since that time they've been told to back off and allow, because, you know, obviously you need a specific permit to sell groceries. But there's a lot of businesses that are doing it right now, and it's working out for them. And I don't know, we'll see how that goes. But there's a restaurant called Maison in Dana Point, and she has kind of turned her restaurant into a market. She does some takeout, which is part of her new branding, but she's selling everything pretty much like Shachi was talking about, with regard to having meals to feed 4 to 6 people. And it's not even a lot of cooking, it's basically reheating. But it's taking all these different items and creating them in bulk and feeding families for, you know, at least 2 meals and sometimes more. And I'm only bringing that up because it's working out really well for her. She had a tremendous week last week when she rolled it out. And I'm gonna, in the reference page that I leave, I'm gonna put her website on there so you can take a look at it. It might make sense for some of you, maybe not, but it is working. There are some ideas, if somebody wants to share. I haven't looked at the chat down there. I don't know if you have, John, but if anybody's got any other things that are working for them.
Yeah, Aaron had a good idea.
Okay.
Maybe we could open it up to.
Yeah, Aaron, why don't you just unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, so sorry, I didn't hear all of the question.
Well, what is you posted something on the chat? What is it that you're doing?
So I was talking on 2 different aspects. I was talking about the program that our company has for feeding healthcare workers. I don't know if that was what John was referring to.
That's one of, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what we're doing, similar to what he was talking about, where people will essentially sponsor a meal for a healthcare worker. And we launched that program nationwide, so we're feeding on average about 25,000 healthcare workers every day. And that just keeps on growing. And then what we'll end up doing is pivoting that to first responders or emergency services as things die down. But then the other thing I was mentioning, I was talking about family meals, because that was being talked about. And what we've seen a lot of restaurants do when they decide to offer a family meal is to have a special where they get dinner and breakfast or and lunch. And that way they're getting a higher sale because in the end, the restaurant is doing this to stay in business. But then they also, the customer's happy because they're getting dinner and then they have something nice to eat for breakfast. So just expanding it just from saying, hey, we're just going to sell one specific meal, to making it, hey, we're going to sell a day of meals.
That's a great idea.
Hey, Tony. Then what Billy's at the Beach has done is they've come up with a survival pack,
Yeah.
and it's 6 Mai Tais and 2 cheeseburgers and fries. So we all need that.
Yeah, and that fits right in with their brand too, so they don't have to go too far outside the box. That's a good idea, and again, that's a great idea. And Aaron, how did that idea come about? Was it customers that were kind of talking about what it is they were looking for, do you think?
So because we deal with the delivery space, so we started seeing people asking, hey, the restaurant's closed because they're adjusting their hours. So then it was a restaurant that might have been open only for breakfast and lunch. We approached them and said, hey, could you make something for dinner? Could you make something that the customer could take home that's not just their lunch or breakfast right then and there?
Right.
And so it takes a little bit of work on the restaurant's part because you're not going to be using to-go packaging to get these meals ready. You're going to put it more inside an actual sealed lid type packaging to where they can put that back in the fridge or they can eat it a couple hours later as opposed to just 5 minutes later.
Yes, that's exactly what I did with Shachi's when I went there to pick up my chicken tikka. I ate half of it and then I put it away. Had the rest the next day, and it was delicious. By the way, you should go check out that pop-up. It's awesome.
Hey Tony, I have one comment to make.
Yeah.
Building off what Sashi said earlier about cooking at home, we our family of 4 bought like a meal kit. It wasn't really a meal kit; it was actually a restaurant locally here in San Clemente that delivered to kind of Easter, that holiday. And what they did was they had a couple steaks and a couple pieces of fish and mashed potatoes, and we're able to kind of take that occasion and leverage it to people who want to support restaurants or don't want to cook or a little bit of both, and just make it convenient. And they're able to charge a premium for it. And the nice thing was that I think they did it at a point where there was definitely value. And I think that's where a lot of consumers are going to start looking. They're going to start trading down. So they're going to go from fast casual down to quick service or fine dining to casual dining, that type thing. But they were able, this restaurant on Sunday was able to provide value. So for us as consumers, we looked at it as, hey, that's a good deal. Doesn't require much cooking, doesn't require any preparation. It was all there for us. And I think they even threw in oatmeal cookies as well. So it was literally soup to nuts of a meal for a day that you probably don't want to cook. But that would be my advice to restaurants, is to provide value where you can.
Can I jump on that real quick? I was just got a notification that Commander's Palace out in New Orleans is doing a virtual a Zoom wine and cheese party. And what they did was they sold tickets. They had their sommelier pick out the wine and cheese selections that they're going to be talking about on the call. I think it was like 6 different wines. So you purchased your ticket, which included, I think, 6 bottles of wine and several different cheeses. They either delivered it or you came by and picked it up, and then set up a specific time where everybody tuned in, and the sommelier kind of walked you through the notes and that kind of thing. Pretty cool kind of thing. And I could see, certain businesses here in Costa Mesa adopting that sort of an application. But also I think that chefs, some of the renowned chefs in the area could, do like, hey, one of my favorite dishes, whatever. Shachi could do, a cooking class on how to make her chicken tikka masala, or make how to do naan at home, these kind of things. Not that you might not want to give too many secrets away, but they still come to the restaurant. But still, you know, it might be an idea and a way to generate revenue in a different manner.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say on that too is get your chef out there or the owner out there talking about it. I just saw one on LinkedIn that McCormick and Schmick did, and they had their chef just talking about what they were doing. And I'm telling you, having the person that creates the food talk about the food is going to go a long way. Okay, so the last thing I was going to talk about was the whole concept of fear with the guest and your employees. And people are very emotional at this time, and nobody's ever experienced this before. And we have to somehow, as restaurateurs and retailers, we have to be able to convert that fear into confidence and assurance, because that's the emotion that's going to drive people back into our business. Right now, they're very emotional. They're unsure. The information has been spotty and has come in from all over, from everywhere. So there is going to be that need to create that confidence, and that's going to happen through masks, gloves, clean aprons. One of the things I'm recommending clients do is start to take videos of their kitchens and being able to post those and kind of walk people through it, to let people see not only how clean your kitchen is, but also the cooking process, and seeing that people are masked and gloved and have the proper attire on. It's going to create that psychological edge that's going to get people back to you a little bit quicker. And then we talked about the reconfiguring of the dining room. That's going to probably end up being mandatory. All of these things you can start working on now and start creating a strategic plan on how you're going to do that, instead of waiting for the veil to get lifted, because it's coming. And you know, again, I wouldn't worry about too much about whether or not your restaurant looks like a hospital room. I would just worry about making sure that there's some comfort in knowing that things are being done properly and that there's safety and sanitation. The last thing I want to do, I wanted to turn it over to the chef, Matt Tobin, because I want him to talk a little bit about the supply chain, because not only is it important that you establish that safety and security within your business, you want to make sure that your supply chain vendors are be able to create that same level of security as well. So I know Matt's doing a lot of work with them right now, and I just wanted to get his take on that.
Thanks, Tony. So one of the things that Tony had mentioned a little earlier in the call that I kind of wanted to touch base on, that I think is going to be, imperative to kind of gaining traction and fostering and building that level of trustworthiness with you and your guests. You need to start really having some in-depth conversations with your vendors. And that is going to be, some of them might be uncomfortable, but essentially what you need to do is within your restaurant need to be able to provide a certain level of transparency with an open door policy. Anything you want, well, obviously with the exception of some recipes and stuff like that, but with regards to your sourcing. So that being said, I think that you need to have talks with your vendors, ensuring that every single level of their suppliers' compliance is tip top. And that can be everything from, there's multiple programs that are governed by either the FDA or the USDA. One of them is going to be the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And the FDA actually just about a week ago essentially said, they wrote a memo saying that it was loose. I loosely understood it as kind of, we're going to be tightening up any possible loose ends there are in our food supply, most specifically with imports. So I think that, that being said, you're gonna want to talk to your vendors about all of the product that they are supplying you with, and if there is any type of questionable or anything going on with regards to produced in this country but packed in that country, things of that nature, I think you're going to be doing yourself a real disservice if you don't get in front of that right now. I was able to reach out to a number of my of colleagues just across the nation. These are folks from from upscale full service restaurants to quick casual, from West Coast to East Coast. Luckily, they're not experiencing any weirdness or any lack of product or anything to that effect. But I think that's pretty much because they're all operating on limited menus at a very limited capacity right now. So we're gonna probably run into a lot of the product that we were used to seeing not necessarily being brought up to the United States standards, for lack of a better term, if that makes any sense,
And real quick, the burden is now going to be on these local or these national suppliers to be able to recreate some of these items, because I don't see this happening for a while, and especially if you're an ethnic restaurant that imports a lot of your product, it's they might be fine right now when the inventory is high, but as soon as that inventory runs down, I'm not sure that's going to be coming over the level of frequency or at a price that makes any sense to you either.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the price point will definitely. So if you are I've got a cioppino that I have to have, that Spanish saffron from Spain, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Based upon where the market demand price on that, if you even can get it in 6 months from now, in my opinion, is going to be cost prohibitive. You're not even going to want to go there. So what the folks that I have been in contact with over the last, the 24 to 48 hours, is they're doing a lot of limited menus. And one of the things that, luckily, a lot of them are very health conscious, forward thinking, sustainable type of concepts. So they're already serving, the Redbird chicken from Colorado. They have not been serving, farm raised shrimp from China, ever, or whatever it is. So I think that, that there's going to be a stigma regardless of just simply imported foods. So luckily, based upon just did a quick crunch of numbers of the USDA last year, 2019, I think that all things considered, and I kind of hope I'm wrong with this, but I think beef, poultry, and pork and produce are going to be a little weird, but not too crazy, because we take a lot of that product from Canada and Mexico, and they're our neighbors. But China is the largest producer and exporter of seafood in the world.
It's just one of those things you're going to have to look at individually in your concepts, because China is a big exporter of a lot of things, and it's going to be slowed down significantly. I'm being told that we got to speed this thing up. The only thing I wanted to mention that Matt was going to talk about is making sure that as part of that whole process of creating that environment of sanitation, that you're using tools to make sure that you're recording what it is you're doing to ensure that happens. And he had a website called, or a product, an app called Jolt, which allows you to monitor what's going on in line checks and temperatures and refrigeration, etc. And then you could be able to monitor that from your phone. But just things like that are going to be something we're going to have to deal with as we start to ramp up. The last thing I'm going to say before we get out of here is that we're going to be doing something like this again. And the next topic is going to be a kind of a checklist of what we can do to get ready for the next phase, which is whatever that looks like. I wouldn't even venture to guess at this point, but we're not done. And I just want to, again, thank everybody for being on this call. I wanted to thank the Chamber and the city for doing this, because it's a great opportunity to share ideas and to be able to get some information. And we're going to send out that reference list for you to look at. Anybody's welcome to reach out to me at any time. I'm available just to have a conversation about what it is you're going through. You want to go through the projection checklist, anything like that, just let me know. I'll help you out. And then I guess I'll turn it over to you, John. You can finish this off.
Well, yeah, and Andrea might have some parting words as well, but I just want to, again, thank the chamber. Thank you, Tony, and the panelists. You guys were great. And all of the participation on chat, and Anais and Michael, of course, for catalyzing this whole thing. And just to offer this, I know we're all suffering, and especially this sector of the economy is suffering. We're doing it for the health and safety of each other. It's very difficult, but we are seeing progress in that area. Costa Mesa, by the grace of God, only has 28 cases right now, and to my knowledge, no deaths. So we're contributing to each other's and safety and keeping us alive. And it's tough, and it's a pain in the ass, and it's hard. But whatever we can do at the city, and whatever I can do, Councilmember Marr, Mayor Foley, the rest of the council, and the city staff, we're here to help you as a resource. All right, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.